I was 16 when I first saw him. It was a Monday morning, just like any other. The hallway was full of noise, footsteps, laughter, the sound of lockers closing. My backpack felt heavy on my shoulder, and I was still sleepy from a late night of studying. I walked into my English classroom, found my seat in the second row, and waited. That's when he walked in. He looked young, much younger than any of our other teachers. Maybe that's why the room suddenly fell quiet. He was tall, with soft brown hair and eyes that looked calm, like they saw more than they said. He wore a simple shirt and dark pants, nothing special. But there was something about the way he walked, the way he held the folder in his hands, the way he smiled without trying too hard. "My name is Mr. Bennett," he said. "I'll be your English teacher this year." The girls beside me giggled. The boys exchanged glances. I said nothing. I just looked at him, not for too long, not too obviously. But in that moment, something inside me shifted. A quiet click, like a key turning in a door I didn't even know was locked. That whole first class, I barely heard the lesson. I watched how he moved around the room, how he wrote on the board, how his voice changed when he read a passage from the textbook. I noticed the way he paused before difficult words, making sure everyone understood. I had always liked English, but now it felt different. From that day on, I never missed his class. I always came early, sat in the same seat, and paid attention to every word. I did all my homework, often finishing it the same night it was given. I read more than was required. I even started writing in a notebook, not schoolwork, just thoughts, stories, little things I hoped one day I might show him. But I was shy. Unlike the other girls who stayed after class to ask him silly questions, I never spoke unless he called on me. I wasn't the kind of girl who made teachers laugh or told jokes out loud. I was quiet, careful. I watched more than I spoke. Sometimes I wore my favorite dress to class, a light blue one, simple but soft. I would brush my hair a little longer those mornings, not because I thought he would notice, but because I hoped he might. And once I thought he did. He was handing back our essays. Mine had a small green sticker on it. "Excellent," it said. Below that, he had written in his neat handwriting, "Beautiful phrasing. You have a strong voice." As he gave it to me, he smiled. "Great job, Lily." It was the first time he said my name like that. Soft, clear, like it meant something. I walked home that day with my heart so full, I didn't even feel the cold wind against my face. That evening, I took out my notebook and wrote a poem. It wasn't very good, but it was honest. As the weeks went on, my feelings grew quietly, like flowers in a place no one looks. I never told anyone, not even my best friend. It felt too delicate, too personal, like saying it out loud might ruin it. So I kept it to myself, tucked between the pages of my notebook and the glances I tried not to give during class. But my heart noticed everything. How he always stayed a few minutes after class to help students, how he brought books from his own shelf and let us borrow them, how he remembered who liked what kind of stories, how he once gave me a copy of a short novel with a note. I think you might enjoy this one. I read it in one night. The next day, I left a small thank you note on his desk before class began. I didn't sign it. He looked up when he saw it, then slowly smiled. I think he knew it was me. One Friday afternoon, I saw him again outside of school. I had gone to the bakery to buy bread for my mother. As I walked out, I saw him across the street, holding a bag of apples. He was laughing with someone, a friend maybe. I hid behind a tree, not because I was scared, but because I didn't want to break the dream. In class, he was my teacher. Outside, he was someone else, someone I didn't know how to talk to. But then, something unexpected happened. I realized he lived near my neighborhood. One evening, I was walking home from the bookstore, and I saw him watering the plants in front of a small white house. The porch light was on. There was a wooden chair near the door. It looked like the kind of place where someone reads quietly in the evenings. He looked up and saw me. "Evening, Lily," he said, smiling. I nodded quickly, my face burning, and walked faster. After that, I sometimes walked past his house on purpose. Not every day, not even every week, just sometimes. On days when the sky felt soft and the air smelled like rain. I never stopped. I never said anything, but he always noticed me. He always waved. Those small moments became the most precious part of my days. But like all stories, this one changed too. It was near the end of the school year when the news came. Mr. Bennett was leaving. He had accepted a new job in another city, a bigger school, better opportunities. He would be gone before the next term began. The announcement was made during morning assembly. Students whispered. Some looked surprised. A few girls looked disappointed. I felt nothing and everything all at once. I didn't cry, not in front of anyone. I sat through his last class like normal. I took notes. I nodded when he explained something. I smiled when he said goodbye. But inside, something was breaking. Quietly, slowly, like pages being torn out of a book, one by one. After he left, the classroom felt different. The desks were still in the same place. The sunlight still came through the windows at the same angle. But the space he used to stand in felt empty, like something important had been taken away. I didn't tell anyone how I felt. I simply moved through the days like a shadow of myself, quiet, present, but somewhere far away inside. Sometimes I would take a different way home from school, the longer way, just to walk past the small white house with the rose bush. But the porch light was off now. The chair was empty. There were no flowers in the window, no watering can beside the steps. He wasn't there anymore. It's strange how someone can be such a big part of your world, and then suddenly they're not. I began to write letters. I never sent them. I never even wrote his name at the top, but they were for him, and I knew it. I wrote about school, about books I was reading, about silly things that made me laugh and serious things that made me cry. I wrote about how hard it was not to see him in the hallway. I wrote about how much I missed his voice. In one letter, I wrote something I never admitted to anyone. I think you were my first love, and I didn't even know what love really meant. I folded that one slowly. I tucked it into the back of my notebook and never looked at it again. As summer passed and I prepared for the university entrance exams, I tried to focus on the future. My parents signed me up for extra classes: math, science, and English. I didn't expect anything special. I thought I would just sit in the back and listen, like I always did. But life, sometimes, has its own plans. On the first day of English class, I walked into a room with white walls, rows of wooden chairs, and a blackboard that still had yesterday's writing on it. I found a seat near the window and looked outside. The trees were still green. The world was still turning. And then I heard a voice behind me. "Good evening, everyone. Let's begin." I turned my head. He was standing there, Mr. Bennet. My heart stopped, not like in movies, where everything becomes dramatic and slow, but in a quiet, steady way, like the sound of a breath held too long. He looked different, a little more tired around the eyes, perhaps, a little more serious, but still him, still the same voice, the same way he held a book like it mattered. When he saw me, he paused. "Lily," he said softly. I nodded. I wasn't sure what else to do. He smiled, a small, surprised smile. "Welcome back." For the rest of the class, I couldn't focus on anything but the way my name had sounded in his voice again. I stared at the page, pretending to take notes. My hands were shaking. My heart kept whispering questions I didn't dare answer. Did he remember? Did I still matter to him? That evening, I stayed after class to ask a question about a passage. He listened carefully, then gave a thoughtful answer. As I turned to leave, he said, "You've always liked words, haven't you?" I stopped. "I still write," I said quietly. He nodded. "You should keep going. You have something." I walked home under the streetlights, my mind louder than the night around me. The next few months felt like something out of a book, not a fairy tale, not perfect, but something delicate and real. We didn't talk every day, but sometimes, after class, we stayed a little longer. We talked about literature, about places he'd been, about the stories I wanted to write someday. One day, I told him about a poem I had written. He asked if he could read it. I handed him a folded page. He read it silently, then looked at me for a long moment. "You feel things deeply," he said. I looked down. "Sometimes it's too much." He didn't laugh, he didn't dismiss it. He simply said, "That's what makes you a writer." I still remember how it felt to hear that. One evening, it began to rain just as we were leaving the classroom. The windows fogged over. The sky was a quiet gray. "Do you have an umbrella?" he asked. I shook my head. He looked outside for a moment, then turned back to me. I'll walk you home. We didn't say much on the way. The streetlights glowed in the puddles. The rain wasn't heavy, just soft, steady, like a memory being written in real time. At the corner near my house, we stopped. "Thank you," I whispered. He looked at me. "It's good to see you again, Lily." And in that moment, the world felt small and safe. After that, we began to walk home together more often. Not every night, just some. The ones that mattered. The ones I still remember. There was no moment when it officially began. We didn't say we were something. We just were. We sat close in the park. We talked for hours in cafes. I shared poems I had never shown anyone. He told me stories from his travels. A rainy train ride in Scotland. A lost wallet in Tokyo. A sunset in Prague. And one evening, under a tree with golden leaves falling all around us, he kissed me. No words, no warning, just a quiet kiss that felt like the closing of a long letter, a letter that had taken years to write. After that first kiss, the world felt quieter. Not because nothing was happening, but because something deep inside me had finally found a place to rest. We didn't talk about what it meant. We didn't need to. There were no labels, no questions. It was simple. I was 17, and I had fallen in love with the only person who had ever really seen me, not just as a student, not as a girl in a blue dress in the second row, but as someone who felt too much, wrote too much, and dreamed far beyond what made sense. We started meeting outside of class more often. We would sit in the park and talk about books. I told him about the novel I wanted to write one day, about a girl who finds love in unexpected silence. He said he would read every word of it. Sometimes we watched movies together, old ones, the kind with slow piano music and long pauses. He said modern films moved too fast. He liked the space between things. I liked that about him, how he noticed the little parts that others missed. One afternoon, as we walked along the river, he stopped suddenly. "I need to tell you something," he said. My heart tightened. He took a deep breath. "I've been offered a job. It's in the US." I stood still. The wind was gentle that day, but in my chest, it felt like a storm was beginning. "For how long?" I asked. He looked away. "It's not a short-term thing. It's a full position. They want me to start in 2 months." I didn't speak. I couldn't. My mouth opened, but nothing came out. "I haven't accepted it yet," he said quickly. "I wanted to tell you first, but I could see it in his eyes. He wanted to go. This was something he had worked for, a dream long before I ever sat in his classroom." I nodded slowly. "That's amazing." He looked at me. "Is it?" I forced a smile. "You've always said you wanted to teach abroad." He laughed quietly. "You remember everything." "I remember you," I whispered. We sat on a bench by the water that evening. We didn't touch. We didn't kiss. But I remember every second of that silence. It was the kind that stays with you long after the sound has returned. We promised to stay in touch. "I'll write you," he said. "Me too," I said. And we did. at first. When he left, he gave me a journal, one with a leather cover and blank pages. Inside the front cover, he wrote, "Fill this with everything you don't know how to say out loud. I'll be reading between the lines." I wrote in it every day. He sent me letters from Boston, then New York, then somewhere in California. He told me about the students, the culture shock, the cold winters. He said he missed London rain. I wrote back about university, about the people I met, about the stories I was writing. I told him I kept his journal on my nightstand, that I read his letters when I couldn't sleep. For the first few months, his letters came regularly, folded carefully, sometimes with little drawings in the corner. I looked forward to the sound of the postman's steps. I would sit by the window in the morning, hoping. But slowly, things began to change. First, a letter was late. Then another came, shorter than the ones before. The handwriting became quicker, rushed. The lines less personal, more polite. "Things are busy. Sorry for the delay. Hope school's going well." And then one day, nothing came at all. I waited a week, then 2, then a month. I told myself he was tired, overwhelmed, that he had just forgotten, that maybe something got lost in the mail. But deep inside, I knew people don't stop writing because they're too busy. They stop when they no longer know what to say. I kept writing anyway, but now in my journal, not in letters. I wrote about how I missed the way he made me feel calm. I missed walking home beside someone who understood silence. I missed the feeling of being someone special. But I didn't cry, not right away. It wasn't sadness at first. It was confusion, a soft, slow silence that filled the space where his words used to be. It was walking to the mailbox, then walking away empty-handed. It was rereading old letters, hoping I had missed something, a hint, a goodbye. By the time I realized he wasn't coming back, not really, I had already learned how to pretend I didn't need him to. I still had the journal and the memory of his voice reading my poem that night. You feel things deeply. Yes, I did. And that's why I knew I had to let go. I didn't throw his letters away. I placed them gently in a wooden box and closed the lid. Not with anger, but with care, like tucking away a favorite book after reading the last page. Because maybe that's what he was to me, a chapter, not the whole story. 8 years passed. I wish I could say I forgot him. That time worked like a magic eraser, gently wiping away the parts of my heart that had once whispered his name. But memory doesn't work like that, not when the feeling is real. I didn't think of him every day, but when I did, it was never with anger. It was with a quiet ache, like missing a place you only visited once, but remember like it was home. I graduated. I got a job at a publishing house. I started writing short stories, not just for myself, but for others to read. I met new people, made new friends. Life, as people say, went on. But sometimes, late at night, when the city outside my window was silent and my lamp was the only light in the room, I would open that wooden box. I would touch the corner of one of his letters. I wouldn't read them all, just one, or even just a sentence, enough to remind myself that once someone saw me and smiled. Then, one quiet afternoon, something unexpected happened. I was scrolling through social media, half looking, half bored, when I saw his name, Daniel Bennett. My heart didn't leap, it didn't break, it just paused. I clicked on his profile. His photo showed a man sitting on a bench, smiling at something off camera. He looked older. His hair was shorter. There were lines near his eyes and around his mouth. But it was him, still him. I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I typed, "Hi, I hope you're doing well, Lily." I didn't expect a reply, but he wrote back the same evening, "Lily, wow, it's been a long time. I'd love to catch up if you're free. Coffee sometime." We met the next Sunday. I chose a small cafe near the river, the kind we used to like. I arrived early. I sat by the window. The waitress brought me a cup of tea I didn't touch. When he walked in, I saw him before he saw me. He looked older, yes, a little heavier. His eyes were tired, like he hadn't slept well in days. But he smiled when he saw me, and in that smile, there was still something soft. "Lily," he said. I stood up. "Hi, Daniel." He sat across from me. We talked about work, about books, about where life had taken us. He told me about the schools he had taught at, about his travels, about how hard it had been sometimes to be away from home. I nodded. I smiled. I asked questions. But the whole time, something inside me stayed still. I was waiting to feel something. That flutter in the chest, that lightness, but it didn't come. At one point, he asked, "Do you still write?" "All the time," I said. "I knew you would," he smiled. "You were always made for stories." I sipped my tea. It was cold now. We talked for nearly 2 hours. And yet, as I left the cafe that day, I realized something simple and strange and sad, but also freeing. He wasn't the person I had loved, and I wasn't the girl who had loved him. That night, I sat on my bed with the box of letters beside me. I opened it and took out the very first one, the one where he wrote about missing London rain. I read it slowly, then placed it back. Gently. It didn't hurt. It warmed something instead. A few days later, he sent me a message. "It was really nice seeing you. I hope we can stay in touch." I replied, "It was good to see you too, Daniel. I wish you all the best." There was no need for more. That weekend, I took a walk alone in the park, the one near my apartment now, not the one from our old memories. The sky was gray. The air smelled like the beginning of rain. And then it started, soft at first, then steady. I didn't run. I didn't open my umbrella. I walked slowly, letting it fall on my shoulders, my hair, my hands. And I remembered that night, the first time he walked me home in the rain. I remembered how close our steps had been, how the silence between us had felt full, not empty. I smiled. because I realized something. Love doesn't always stay, but it leaves something behind. A version of yourself, a truth you didn't know until you felt it, a tenderness that shapes the way you see the world. He was not the end of my story. He was the part that taught me how to begin. Sometimes I still think of him when I hear a quiet song, when I see a street lamp glowing in the mist, when I find one of his letters in an old book I haven't opened in years. But I don't miss him. I remember him, and remembering is enough, because life goes on. It always does. And love, even the kind that doesn't last, still grows something inside us. Like rain, it falls quietly. It makes us stop. It changes us. And then it helps new flowers grow.